Yeah, it is the People's Show on a lot going on, Sats, today, as it's the dog days of summer, yes, but you have the Olympics. Evan Dunphy in the final few kilometers of the race walk, which is just a nice way of saying light jog, it feels like.
Yes, but they go very fast.
They do. Like, what do they do? 46 kilometers in 3 hours? I mean, that's pretty impressive. 3.5 is where they're at right now. 3.5 hours, about 46 kilometers. They're in the final few of the race. I believe at last check, Dunphy is in 7th spot in a cluster of a few racers. So he'll probably be making his final push in the next few minutes. But it's also a day where we get NFL football going, Sat, and it's the Cowboys and the Steelers. It's one of those things. Always get super excited for the NFL to return, but and always super excited for the first few preseason games. And then I watch a few preseason games, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's the preseason.
And then you kind of realize that you still have about 5 weeks to go before you even get to the NFL season.
The
so
good
you're
stuff.
Excited. Yeah, and it's always exciting. It's super exciting, right? Even preseason, like I'm always jacked for it. And then like you get into the second half and you're like, can I get to September 12th already?
Yeah. It's not like it's not as pointless as some people make it out to be, but there's definitely things you can learn in preseason. It's just definitely not the real thing, which is still coming up in week 1. Now, let's get to our next guest, Matthew Caller of Purple Insider, covering the Minnesota Vikings. Thanks for this, Matt. How are you?
Oh, man, exhausted. Usually we don't have this much crazy news in the first, 7 days of training camp. So it's been a little much. Kirk needs to give us a break.
Yeah, I you know what though, I kind of expected some players to be the way they are. I did not necessarily expect Mike Zimmer to be the voice of get vaccinated, which has kind of been the curveball I wasn't really expecting here in Vikings preseason.
Yeah, you're not the only one who said that. I mean, there's even people with the Minnesota Vikings who have said that to me of we didn't necessarily expect Mike Zimmer to be sort of, like you said, the voice of reason and the loudest pounding drum of get the vaccination, everybody. But, I think with Mike Zimmer, everything is about winning football games. It's not about politics. It's not about what TV station you watch or anything else. It's for him. It's like, when the election happened, I remember somebody sort of made a joke to Mike Zimmer, like, who'd you vote for? And he was like, there was an election? And I actually believed him because he's just all football. So he doesn't care about even sort of the implications of the things that he's even saying, right? And even how that might impact his star players and how they view him and if they feel alienated. And I'm not saying he's done the wrong thing. It's just that, I mean, now you've created quite a situation where your quarterback is digging his heels in, your head coach is digging his heels in. It's like, well, where do we go from here with this situation? It seems like there's just going to be a lot of tension and discomfort because Kirk Cousins more or less told us today that he's not doing this. And yet the head coach has said he's very upset with anyone who's not doing it.
And that's the big thing here. And not to make – I don't even want to make this about getting the vaccine or not. I've been double vaccinated. We here in Canada, we've been encouraging people to get it and all that sort of stuff. But the thing here that I don't get is you're the leader of the team as the starting quarterback, right? And you see what this does. I know Ryan Tannehill didn't want to do it really, but he said, I'm doing it for the team. Can this create, as you mentioned, a bit more tension and, maybe even a lack of respect from the guys that go come in and say, hey, we're doing this to make life easier, and here's our quarterback kind of wanting to live in his own bubble?
Yeah, and I thought that Tom Pelissero of NFL Network made a really good point when he was asked, what do you think the main factor is for why teams are different when it comes to vaccination rates. Now, I mean, of course, you have all sorts of different varying personalities, but one of the things he said was who the quarterback is. I mean, Patrick Mahomes was one of the first players to get vaccinated, and he came out and said, everybody, let's do this, and let's make sure we're healthy and play the complete season and all that sort of thing. And his team has followed along, and I think that, for the entirety of the time that Kirk Cousins has been a Minnesota Viking, it sort of felt like your mercenary quarterback. Like, it hasn't really ever felt like this is Kirk Cousins' franchise, and he's not that type of guy either. I mean, he's sort of I'm going to get the contract I'm going to get, even if it costs too much on the salary cap. I'm looking out for, as much guaranteed money as I can possibly get, and that's always sort of been who he is. And I'm for players getting paid, so I'm not saying that Kirk should have taken less or anything. It's just that he's never been really like that guy who just says, I am in command, this is my team. So it's sort of like par for the course for him to be the guy that's making the, I guess you would call it, selfish decision. I think that's what Mike Zimmer basically called it the other day. So, yeah, I think that does impact how many other guys on this team have gotten vaccinated, because it's far from just Kirk Cousins. They have the lowest vaccination rate in the entire league.
Yeah, and, you mentioned I guess some of the dialogue that's going on in the media between the coach and the quarterback. And, I had this Vikings team pegged to be pretty good. I think the defense is going to bounce back this year from where it was last year. But, now it just seems like there's a lot of discourse, and it makes me wonder, if I should just stay away from the Vikings.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is usually the thing that we always say about Kirk Cousins is, if everything goes right for Kirk Cousins, you could win X, Y, and Z. But how often does it ever go right? I mean, in 2018, they didn't have the right offensive coordinator. 2019, they win a playoff game, but they didn't have the offensive line. Last year, they don't have the defense. It's like, well, this year, you might be better in some of those areas as a roster, but now you have this headbutting between the head coach and the quarterback over an issue that is very, very sensitive. And I think we saw even today just how defensive Kirk Cousins is about how he feels about it. He won't explain why he's so defensive, but it's very clear that he is. And so you have the head coach sort of attacking something that seems to be some type of core belief. Again, he won't explain it, so I can't explain it to you, but there seems to be some belief against it. And so, this goes a little bit more than skin deep, right? And this is a relationship, too, that has never blossomed between Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins. They're very opposite personalities, offensive quarterback, defensive head coach, that kind of thing. But they've never really had much of a relationship to begin with, and now it's very tense. It's just, can you really overcome that when you're a team that has never overcome anything with Kirk Cousins? And in fact, no team that he's been on has ever overcome anything. Like Washington didn't have great defenses, so they just missed the playoffs or lost in the first round when he was their quarterback. It just, I think there's a lot of reasons to question that they'll be able to maximize their talent when you're starting off on this foot.
Well, the question becomes how this season goes is going to impact, obviously, his future. But could you foresee a situation where if they get off to a bad start, that they just bench him and then work to get out from under that contract next year?
Yeah, that's what's really tough because, last year they were 1-5 and he was leading the league in interceptions, and they decided to stick with him. And it's really of the nature of who Kirk Cousins is to have these crazy ups and downs. I mean, a lot of times it's dictated by the schedule, but if you look at every one of his seasons of his career, he's got 4 or 5 games where he's the MVP and player of the month, and then he's got 4 or 5 games where you lose because your quarterback's just not good enough and he throws away games. And if he starts out on one of those bad Kirk type of runs, I don't think that they'll bench him, but I think that the decision will kind of be made, if it isn't already, about his future. I've had some people say to me, I think he's out no matter what after this year, that this is kind of it. And I think the concern you should have if you're a Vikings fan is the last time that we knew Kirk was in his last year with a team was with Washington in 2017, and they went 7-9, and he had his worst year as a quarterback. So, I think all these things are factors, but they do have a really good team around him. It's just hard to see everybody continuing to go in the direction when we've had so much tension between the head coach and the quarterback. So you've got to decide. Are you going to extend Kirk and he's your guy, or are you going to stick with Zimmer? Are you going to stick with nobody? And how it all plays out will probably determine that.
Well, they don't really have many other options other than Kirk right now that could plausibly get them wins, right?
Yeah, no, definitely not. I mean, Jake Browning did a nice job while everyone else was on the COVID list, and he kept the train on the tracks, as I wrote for my website. Like, that's admirable for sure, because you don't fall behind all the other teams. But if you were asking Jake Browning to play 5 games, you're probably winning one of them, maybe at best, unless your defense is unbelievable. And I mean, I've had people say to me, "No, he's kind of like Case Keenum or something." Well, I don't know. I don't know if I want to quite go that far. But no, they don't have. The thing with Kellen Mond is that Kellen Mond didn't look good before he got COVID. He was not even the backup quarterback even before COVID. That was still Jake Browning. And again, Jake Browning, like, great kid, and he did a good job this week at practice, but that's a low bar to jump over. And the fact that Kellen Mond didn't jump over it, to me, says, hey, look, I mean, this kid's going to take a long time if it's ever going to happen. And he's a third-round pick, too. So I don't think that there's much pressure there. I think they'd have to be really bad if they were getting to a point that they were going to go to Kellen Mond. I mean, they'd have to be like, 4-10 or something, and everybody's been fired already. That would be the only point I could ever see them, turning it over to Kellen Mond.
So when it just comes to the outlook of the team in general in that division, in the NFC North, where we know the Green Bay Packers odds-on favorites, even with all the soap opera around Aaron Rodgers, they'll still be the team. What do you think they can actually accomplish in that division this year against the Bears and the Lions?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to prove it to me that they're better than the Packers with Aaron Rodgers back. I mean, the only scenario would be if Rodgers just doesn't really care. But, I mean, come on. I mean, if he is going to all this effort to come back and force his team to trade for Randall Cobb, he's going to try his heart out, is my guess. And he's especially going to try his heart out against the Vikings, his longtime rival. So I think the Packers will be very good. I could see them being like 13-4. They've got a stacked team that they made a lot of effort to bring back. The Bears are a really interesting one because you think, okay, a rookie quarterback, like how much can he really do in Justin Fields? But they got a lot of wins out of Mitch Trubisky, and he was just about the worst quarterback in the league over the last 3 years, which I think it says a lot about what they've had as a defense. Some of their weapons are pretty good. I think they've got a halfway decent head coach who dragged as much as he could out of Mitch Trubisky. And from a Vikings perspective, they don't play Chicago until the very end of the season, which means that's kind of like the guy coming along if he's a good rookie quarterback with Justin Fields. So I think that a lot of people here in Minnesota are saying, oh, it's us in Green Bay, but I would not write off Chicago. I would, however, write off the Detroit Lions. I would definitely not say that they're a factor here, but Chicago I think really could be.
What do you mean? Any person that drinks that much coffee can get his team going in the right direction. Are you not convinced Dan Campbell and his over 1,000 milligrams of caffeine every single morning is going to help the Lions get a couple more wins?
I do respect it because I drink Diet Coke, Diet Pepsi, Diet Dr. Pepper. I drink that like that. Like I'll drink probably a couple liters a day, and I'm sure not very good for you, just as what Dan Campbell's doing. The only way it could turn around in Detroit quickly is if Matt Patricia was truly that bad, which I would open the door to. I would just leave that door open just a crack because I think he might have been actually that bad. And now, with a new coach, it's possible they're more competitive. I just don't see that roster having any chance to, no matter how many kneecaps they bite or coffee they drink. I just don't think that they've got the horses to get there.
I mean, Matt Patricia, when you have a mutiny in your first ever preseason, or at least reports of, that's never a good sign. I mean, I'm not an expert, I'm just saying. But when we look at the NFC in general, I mean, especially here in Vancouver, there are a lot of Seahawks fans with Seattle being so close. And the NFC West is absolutely stacked, and we're not quite sure, obviously, who's going to win that division. But when you kind of handicap the NFC in general behind Tampa, how do you view it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Green Bay is right behind them, and then it's everybody else. And that's what's so interesting about the conference and really about this Viking season is that it feels like the door is open to be a really good team. And that's why when you have a training camp that starts like this, that not only has this drama with the head coach and the quarterback, but also their first-round pick from last year got indicted and then cut. And then you had their offensive line coach ends up out because he won't get the vaccination. Like, you've got to look at it and say, gosh, is Dallas that much better than the Vikings? Is Arizona? I mean, Seattle seems to be like kind of half a good roster and half not a good roster. I think it gets really muddy behind the top two teams. I would still say that the team I'm most interested in that I think has a really high potential is San Francisco, because even like Jimmy Garoppolo had them in the Super Bowl, and I think their team is still really stacked. So I've got them coming out of the NFC West. But, I mean, aside from that, like, are you worried about Carolina and Sam Darnold? Like, absolutely not. There's just a lot of meh going on in the NFC, and that's why I think that if the Vikings don't, get into the playoffs and don't compete in the playoffs, that it's an even worse season than it would be in past years when the NFC was stronger and, had Drew Brees in it.
Matt, I appreciate your time here today. I'm going to ask one more favor. Can we get pictures of Kirk Cousins being Bubble Boy in his plexiglass as he's walking around training camp? Like, we'll need that on your Twitter account at some point.
I just can't believe how often this happens with Kirk, right?
Yeah,
I've only covered him for 3 years, and I feel like there's about 10 different times the guy has been memed. It's unbelievable.
It's incredible. Thanks for this, Matt. Always appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
There's Matthew Caller covering the Vikings for Purple Insider, and does it well. So if you're a Vikings guy or you just want to know more about the Vikings, check out Matthew Caller. You can follow him by his name on Twitter. Like, do you think that's what he's going to do? He's just going to, like, walk around training camp? Like, I don't want to get the vaccine, so I'm just going to, like, tape a box of plexiglass to my hip and just get into it every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he'll end up just doing is he'll just have his mask on, and that's all he's going to do.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up on the COVID list. And I don't mean like he gets sick. I mean, God forbid, I don't want anybody to get sick. That's not the point. But like, especially with the new rules in the NFL, like if you're close proximity or whatever it is, close contact, like it's so easy for you when you're not vaccinated under the new rules to end up in protocol one way or another, right? Like there are just so many things that could happen, right? So that's the risk you run, and that's why coaches don't want their players to be in protocol. So not only is that going to be a thing, like there's a decent chance he ends up in protocol one way or another this season, and that's a tough spot when you're trying to be competitive and you're trying to get everybody on the same page on your football team.
It's tough. I think the quarterback dynamic part of it is the really interesting thing where, he's supposed to be the leader of the team and he's not doing that. And look, we're all going through this in our lives. I'm sure we all know someone or members of the family or friends of friends that aren't getting in on the vaccine and they don't believe in it and all these things. And it's an awkward conversation, but you're in a team setting. That's a tough sell to do that and to be the leader of your team. You're already, not on the same page as your coach. Those are big problems for the Minnesota Vikings. And Chris, can you hit me with some breaking news, please? I just want to say
breaking news.
Thank you. Canada's got another medal at the Olympics. Evan Dunphy just crossing the finish line in third in the race walk as he finishes 51 seconds behind the gold medaler Tamala from Poland. But Evan Dunphy doing it again, medaling again in the Olympics here at Tokyo 2020.
What a strong finish. He was like in seventh. He closed to fifth, and it wasn't that far. We're like, man, I don't think he's going to make up all this ground. He made up a lot of ground over the last little bit. What a performance from Evan Dunphy.
Richmond's very own Evan Dunphy, just doing it again in the 50K race walk. Impressive. Yeah, I saw him back there in seventh. Really made up some ground. Kristen Duncan was like, how is he going to make a push? Who makes a push in a race walk? Well, Evan Dunphy does. That's who. He made a big push. The Polish player was way ahead and ended up closing it out, even though it seemed like he was running out of gas. But Dunphy still finishing with a bronze medal and obviously doing it in pretty impressive fashion. Had the gold at the 2015 Pan Ams. Evan Dunphy of Richmond getting the bronze for Canada here.
Celebrate. What? It's huge, too. I mean, look at it. They're going to get up to like over 20 medals. This is medal number 19, right? And one is guaranteed in the gold medal match. We'll see if they get one in the relay as well. So, I mean, Canada's going to push that medal count to over 20.
Yeah, and it's just such a great story after what happened to Dunphy in 2016 with, the whole scandal around the getting the medal and not getting the medal, and then saying that they shouldn't appeal further. Everything that happened there, and now he gets his Olympic medal here in these games. You love to see it, and an impressive story for Evan Dunphy. So yes, Canada on the board again, starting a great day, Sat, as we're guaranteed a medal with the Canadian women. But let's hope that one's gold.
Yeah, you know what? Strong finish. That's what we want. We're going to get some sleep in between. Then we're going to wake up, drink lots of coffee. Reach is going to go Dan Campbell on the Spros, and he's going to will Canada to a victory.
So, honestly, I don't know how, somebody could PVR the game tomorrow morning.
I mean, I get it. Like, if you're super tired, I can understand it. I mean, you can completely avoid it and then put it on. Like, sometimes when Chelsea plays at 4, I'm not getting up.
Well, I mean, it's one thing to watch, match day 4 against Brighton and Hove Albion, and another thing to watch Canada versus Sweden in the gold medal final.
I know, but sometimes you need your sleep. I'm saying, sleep is important. So if you need your sleep, if that's really important to you, then you can PVR and watch it. Hey, listen, these Olympics are tough because it's in Tokyo, and I think we've all had to catch up a little bit the next day.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of passes. If it's 7 a.m. and you want to sleep in, yeah, okay, dude, wake up. But if it's 5 a.m. or earlier, that's tough. If you work at the midnight and you got a long day ahead of you, that's not easy.
All right. Sat's always the logical one.
Trying to be reasonable.
All right. It is the People's Show coming up. Justin Bourne's going to join us, Sportsnet.ca and Hockey Central host. How important is it to have good teammates? This kind of ties in with the conversation we were having around Kirk Cousins as well. But thinking of it from a hockey perspective, Justin's got a good piece out on players like Tony DeAngelo and Evander Kane and how they fit in to a hockey locker room. We'll get to that next here on the People's Show, Sportsnet 650. And we're back here on Sportsnet 650. Everything's fine. It's just another technical issue here. Dan Riccio and Satyar Shah here on the People's Show, Sportsnet 650. And just a couple technical issues we've been dealing with today and working through it as we can. Appreciate you sticking with us as you can and letting us know on the Dunbar Lumber text line that we had gone off air, but we hope to have everything sorted out now. Sat, do I have you there?
I am here.
Okay, cool. Well, it gave me some time to watch Evan Dunphy closing out that bronze and get a little look here at the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers. At least I got something to do while we're working through this.
Yeah, I mean it's a busy sports day, believe it or not. So that's where we're at. CFL also began, so here we go. We got baseball, we got CFL, we have NFL, we have Olympics. Everything is on.
Jay's winning again, which is good. Garrett Gilbert and Mason Rudolph, the quarterback matchup in this Hall of Fame game. Garrett Gilbert.
No Dak is not interesting.
Yeah.
Garrett Gilbert was he was a Cleveland Browns third stringer for a while.
We're going to work to get Justin Bourne on the show. He was slated to join us at 5:30 and working on that. But an interesting article from Bourne on sportsnet.ca regarding teammates and how they can disrupt dressing rooms and team chemistry. Let's bring in Justin now. What's going on, Justin?
Oh, not too much. Just, watching competitive race while walking, petting a cat, the usual standard night.
I know you've been wagering with your heart. Did you wager on Evan Dunphy?
You know what? I didn't. I can't say competitive race walking came up in my field of events for the evening to tune into. Listen, I'm having a hard time because I absolutely respect what the guy did, and it's a great story coming off Rio and whatever. But, man, there's a guy in his 8th Olympics for competitive race walking, which for me kind of takes away from the sport's credibility.
It's one of those things, right? It's one of those sports that maybe until we actually do it, we don't quite understand what it takes.
This thing, though, I'm not saying it's not hard or it's not whatever. It's just you shouldn't be able to be at the top of a sport for 32 years. It says something about the sport.
What do you mean? Isn't that what Tom Brady has been doing in the NFL?
Yeah, you have to double his career length to get there, I think. Yeah, but he may yet, so I'll hold my tongue on that.
So we were kind of intrigued at what you wrote about at sportsnet.ca, and we were just talking about it with Kirk Cousins and the situation going on in Minnesota with him. But you write about Tony DeAngelo, Evander Kane, and situations in NHL rooms and how it can affect a team. It's one of those, murky areas. We don't really have numbers we can go on to really back up our thoughts. But, how do you, we kind of even felt it in Vancouver last year, just something wasn't really right within the team and some of the new additions didn't really fit. How big is team chemistry when it comes to building a hockey team?
I often, honestly, it's probably the thing I debate in my own head more than anything else. Because I feel like I'm kind of uniquely positioned to talk about, being in those dressing rooms for most of my life, but also the analytics and the analysis. And so I kick this around a lot. And I think we often overstate it, the value of chemistry. These guys are professionals. They play their positions. They work in a system. Yeah, it's important, and maybe it helps guys stay motivated and work. It does good things, having good chemistry. But I think it's much worse to have bad chemistry than it is important to have awesome chemistry. I don't think you have to have the best, but I think if you got problems, it really can undo a team. It can undo trust. It can undo effort. It can do a lot of things to a locker room, which is why I mentioned in the piece that I think teams generally think they can have a bad guy and get along fine with everyone. But once there's two and they're feeding off each other and, kind of starting to form their own coalition against the greater good and the common cause, things start to fall apart for a team.
And that's the big thing because it's funny. You're right. Chemistry and all those things can be overstated. We talk about character a lot, but that chemistry is a very fragile ecosystem sometimes too, and individual relationships can change really quickly as well, no matter how good they were the previous year. So when you enter somebody in that doesn't click, it can really undo things really quickly. I know it's the old adage and it's a cliche, it's hard to build something, it's easy to break it apart, but that's kind of the way chemistry goes oftentimes.
Yeah, I also don't think that you can import chemistry. You can look at your team and say, we went and got a great locker room guy and this is going to make the difference. Coming into another locker room, it is what it is. The culture is established within a room. And if you're the new guy, you're not really changing the culture, without a massive change of new guys, 4 or 5 guys coming in at the same time. So, it's something that teams know they need, but don't really know how to pursue. In junior hockey, they'll make you go bowling and they make you hike and they force you into all these different sort of events where you get to know people and hopefully form bonds. At the NHL level, the guys are making $6 million. They're not going to play laser tag with the rookies. It's a different world. So I think a lot of it's just luck that you have good chemistry.
Well, the thing about you're willing to live with jerks as long as they're performing, right? Aren't you?
Yeah.
The Rangers, they lived with Anthony DeAngelo while he was putting up a 50-point season. Sharks had been putting up with seemed just fine with Evander Kane and the numbers he was putting up during the course of last season. They gave him the big contract after they traded for him. As long as you're putting up numbers, kind of feels like the jerk title doesn't necessarily matter too much.
Yeah, it's kind of the better player you are, the more leeway you're afforded, unfortunately. But that's just the reality of life. That's not a hockey thing. That's, it's kind of in all walks of life and all business, unfortunately. But, there's just a line where it doesn't matter. Like, Evander Kane's the perfect example of a guy who easily gave them $7 million worth of value in San Jose, scoring 22 times in 56 games. Great season for him. I think he had 49 points or something. He said it was the most consistent season of the year. But, it's tough to know what effect he had on other players. Like, I can't recall how many times in an NHL season a beat writer has written an article that says, Sharks teammates or whoever's teammates don't want so-and-so back. Like, it has to be bad to be telling the beat writer you don't want a guy back. So we don't know that the Sharks weren't greatly kneecapped by his behavior. And there's a level where it just doesn't even matter how good you are. People won't put up with it. It's not worth having that guy around, even if he's good.
Well, and I think it is kind of interesting, though, because I remember Trevor Linden talked about this a while back, and he said, well, you kind of need some jerks on your team, not just in the sense of, how you play on the ice, but you kind of need some of those personalities for in a dynamic in a locker room, but also
Nate McKinnon.
People, right? No, like, you kind of do need that sometimes. So, like, don't you kind of need a guy that's not afraid of, shaking things up when things get a bit complacent?
Yeah, it totally depends on what we're talking about, right? Like, you need a guy who's like, hey, man, quit eating Alfredo sauce and ice cream at lunch, you idiot. You're overweight, like, that's great. I got no problem with Nate McKinnon doing that. But you have a bigger problem when it's like, hey, anyone seen Evander? Like, the power play meeting's supposed to go off. We got to be out in the ice for warm-up soon. There's different types of jerkery, but I get the idea a little bit that it's good to have some people who push each other and say some things that need to be said and maybe are a little bit over the top honest and blunt and cause some ruffles when it's not necessary. That's okay. But, doing things at the cost of the team and your teammates is a different type of jerk.
Can I ask, what is the ideal post-game meal then? I mean, for me, it's definitely not chickpea pasta. I'll say that much.
It's pretty close to pizza. I know that's obnoxious, but like it's, you're looking for a 4-to-1 carb to protein ratio, which you can get in a decent slab. Like you get it in you pretty quick. A little bit of sugar in the tomato sauce. You're doing pretty good with a slice. But most of these teams now, it's maybe it's chickpea pasta. I haven't dealt with that when I play, but it's just pasta and a red sauce and a lean chicken breast. And the best thing as a player is you got to have some fat on your body. Like you're not trying to be a speed walker. So there's different types of body types that need to eat differently. But generally, everyone just eats pasta and chicken. It's boring as hell.
Yeah, well, you need it for energy, though. The amount of energy that gets spent in a hockey game, though, like your body's burning. You'll burn it all off right away anyways. But before we let you go, one of the biggest stories in the game is the whole Jack Eichel situation, but it just keeps slowly dragging on. Like, I mean, it's getting to the point now where, if he wants to get his procedure, he thinks he might be ready for the season, but you're getting pretty close to it. Like, is it getting to a point now where, it may not even make sense to rush into a trade if he's going to miss some time anyways?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a big moment for Kevin Adams about how he's going to be dealt with. And like, if Eichel is able to steamroll him here, it's not going to be a great look. He's done some decent things, Adams has, but like this is a big, pivotal moment in the franchise. And looking at what happened with Ryan O'Reilly, like that was part of what submarined this team for years to come, and it just can't happen like that again. The greatest outcome here is that Eichel gets to have the procedure he wants. It helps him. Buffalo gets players they need, and that none of this happens for a few months, so Jack Eichel misses the Olympics and he's not on the American team. That's the best outcome in all events, thinking of us Canadians here.
Justin, we appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you for this.
Anytime. Thanks, guys.
There is Justin Bourne, Sportsnet.ca and Hockey Central host. Hey, golfers, get great Vancouver golf for less. Go to discountgolfcard.ca for all the details and to order your Vancouver discount golf card today. When we come back, Andrea Neal, legend of the Canadian game. She'll join us and what she thinks Canada needs to do to beat Sweden tomorrow. It is The People's Show, Sports at 650.